Welcome to the Smart Dating Academy podcast. I'm Bela Gandhi, the founder of Smart Dating Academy and your host. I started Smart Dating Academy in 2009 because I had this crazy knack of giving people dating advice that actually worked, that I took. I've been married for almost 25 years, and now my company helps people to date smarter and to find love. This podcast is meant to bring more love into your life, no matter where you are and what you do. And we're here to bring more life into your love. Smart daters, welcome back to this week's episode. And this week is especially special for me because it's someone that I know and love and met 3 years ago. And her name is Anushka. And she is a Smart Dating client, former client, because now she's found the lid to her pot, and current friend. So Anushka, welcome to the podcast. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here. And I know we talked about sharing my story, so I'm finally ready to share it with the world.
Oh my gosh, you guys. Okay. So she said when we were working together, we were talking about something and her photos were so pretty, or I must have asked her like, can I like share your photos on a TV segment as I do like before and afters? I must have said something. She's like, Bela, once I get engaged, you can share my story far and wide. So guess what? Not only is she engaged, but dun, 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 she's already married. So we are so excited for you to tell us where you were, what your journey was, and how you got to where you are now. So you and I met 3 years ago. And why don't you just start out with like a little bit of background about you, your family, where you were, how you grew up? Give us the goods.
Yeah, sure. So I guess from the time I was young, I've always been pretty type A and pretty driven. I am from a South Asian family. Both my parents are Sri Lankan. I don't know how much that had to do with how driven I am or how crazy and type A I am, but I'm guessing it played a little part in it.
Probably a small one for many of us on this podcast call.
But I always had a clear idea in my mind from the time I was very little of like exactly what I wanted to achieve in life and the timeline I wanted to achieve it on. So from the time I was probably 10, I was like, I need to go to an Ivy League college, and then I need to get a really good job. And then I want to get married by the time I'm 27. And then I want to have 2 kids by the time I'm 35. And that was like the perfect picture that I painted for myself. That was like the epitome of success, of what my future would look like.
That's what so many of us think, right? It's like you sit there and you daydream like, yes, I'm going to go to an Ivy League school. And yes, I'm going to get married. And yes, I'm going to have kids, as if it all just magically happens when it should and pops into our laps, right? And
exactly.
And sometimes that happens, but a lot of times it doesn't happen. It doesn't happen. So now what happens? So you make it. Did you go to an Ivy League school? You did.
I did.
You did.
Yeah, I did. And I kind of like felt like I, was really achieving everything I wanted to achieve in terms of my job and my schooling and my background. I had a ton of friends. But as I started to get into like my late 20s, I started to question, oh shoot, like this timeline I've set for myself on getting married and having kids is starting to look less and less realistic. And so that started to worry me. At the time, I guess by the time I was 30, I had moved to Boston. I had finished grad school where I got my second Ivy League degree.
Will you share with us where you went just to inspire all of us?
For undergrad, I went to UPenn, and for grad, I went to the Tuck School of Business, which is at Dartmouth. So 2 very different experiences, but experiences that I think got me where I am today, both in terms of personal and professional life. So I think that's how it gets interesting. But yeah, so I moved to Boston and started to realize like, shoot, I'm 27. I thought I was going to be married at this point. At that point, I had had one serious relationship, which was my boyfriend that I had met in grad school. And that didn't pan out very well.
No.
He's a great guy, but he just wasn't the right person for me.
Yeah.
He realized that before I did. So that was tough.
He came to that conclusion before I did,
yes,
and I
he came
accepted
to that conclusion before I did, but I do like to think that like at least I had that one bad breakup experience. So now I can commiserate and understand like what other people are going through when they're going through a breakup, because that never I never understood like how it could be so heartbreaking. And I would look at others that were going through a breakup and just like laugh at them and be like, they're ridiculous. So I think it built my empathy for other people.
It's so sucky, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's terrible.
It was terrible, but in hindsight, definitely the best thing for me and for him. But yeah, so then at that point, I had moved to Boston. I was 30, had a great group of friends in Boston, had the most amazing apartment, had like my dream job out of grad school, but had spent a lot of time on online dating apps and could not get a date. Like, I think I shared with you like in our first meeting, or even when I reached out to you actually, that like I've been on these apps for like 3 years now. I can get matches, which I don't think I really even got that many matches compared to my friends, but like I can't get a person to respond to my messages.
We're like, what?
I don't know what was happening, but I just like went on maybe 2 dates in 3 years. Like it was, even though I was actively trying. And so at that point I started to get like really worried, really down on myself. Like my friends were like, don't worry, you're a great catch. Like, you're awesome. You're going to find someone. It just takes time. And I'm like, but I've been trying like for 3 years and I haven't gotten anywhere.
Wow. That must have been hard.
Yeah, it was really hard. Like all my friends were starting to get married, or they were engaged, or most of them were in serious relationships. And so I could just start to see people like achieving that timeline that I was so fixated on. And I was just felt like I was like falling behind. But then I also started to realize like, not only am I falling behind my timeline, but I'm also like potentially going to be alone forever. And so that really felt scary.
Right. You're like, what are the consequences of not meeting the objective plan?
Yeah, exactly. It's like, okay, the timeline probably doesn't matter as much as just finding someone that is going to be the right person for me to spend the rest of my life with. So I actually started Weight Watchers because I was convinced that it had something to do with my weight, on why I wasn't meeting anyone. I guess for reference, most people would probably say I'm not overweight.
You're not. I've seen you. I don't think I knew this part of the story.
But yeah, I was like, okay, it must have, like, if I was skinnier, it would be easier to meet someone. And so I started Weight Watchers, and through Weight Watchers, started following these like fit influencers on Instagram, and like loved to look at their pages for inspiration. Sure. And one of the people I started following was someone on Instagram with the handle Everything Erica.
Yay, Everything Erica, well. Erica Ekman.
And she also had a podcast that I stumbled upon through her Instagram. And there were a couple episodes on the podcast where Bela was featured and Smart Dating Academy was featured. And it was all about like how to find the right relationship. And I was like, oh my God, I need this woman's help. So I was like, all my prayers have been answered. Like, let me just reach out to this person and see if she can help me. And so that's how I heard about you. And when I first reached out to you.
Wow. And do you remember what was our first interaction like? And then what happened?
I think it was a phone call, and you just started talking to me, and I was just so struck by like how effusive your personality was and how you just like understood what I was going through. And I think you were just like, I can help you. Like like, you know, this isn't like rocket science. I can help you. And so it just gave me a lot of hope, that I've always been a great student. Like I can study really hard and pass a test. And it just gave me hope that like, maybe there is maybe I'm doing this wrong. And like, there's a teacher that can teach me how to do this, and I can be a great student. I know I can do that. So it just gave me a ton of hope that like things could turn around.
I hope for those of you listening, you're hearing this, and maybe you've listened to so many things and you've read so many things and you've done all the things. But if you find yourself like Anushka going, okay, I've been doing this for 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, and it's not working, just know that there are ways to get help through this process. Sometimes we feel so isolated and like we're the last single person on earth, and maybe we're too damaged. Like you said, I'm too heavy, I'm too old, I'm never going to find love, and all that stuff. All of these things multiply in our heads, but we're here to tell you, number one, there is help, and you are incredibly lovable as you are. Just like I said to Anushka, like, you can do this. We can help you. So we have this conversation. You're like, yay, let's do this. So now you fly to Chicago, and what happens?
Yeah.
Which is where we're based. If you're a new listener, we're based in Chicago, and we do photo shoots and fun stuff here.
Yeah. So I flew to Chicago, and was excited to meet with you and Lindsay. We met up, and I just remember that first meeting, which was like several hours long. I was really excited because it was at the Four Seasons. So I was just excited for lunch at the Four Seasons, but also to get started and to change my life, hopefully. And so I remember in that first meeting, one of the things you asked me to do was like list out all the characteristics I was looking for in my ideal person. And I've had this list of probably like 30 to 40 things I was looking for that had been in my head from the time I was 12, probably, of like all the things I was looking for: someone who's smarter than me, someone who has a better job than me, someone who's like physically attractive, someone who's tall, someone who's good with my family. Just like the list went on and on and on. And you basically said, okay, that's a great list. Great job with that exercise. And I was like, great, I've like really nailed it. And you were like, okay, now we're going to rip up this list because this is not what you should be looking for in a partner. This like has no relevance to what you're looking for. And we did that exercise where I think you asked me to think about people in my life that made me feel really good to be around.
Yeah.
And,
your elevator people.
Yeah. And describe the characteristics of those people. And you helped me realize that's actually what I should be looking for in a partner.
And do you remember what were the most important things that came out of your list, your elevator list?
Yeah, I think it was really just being around people who made me feel supported and loved, and yeah, who just felt good to be around, where I felt my best when I was around them. It was hard to pinpoint like exact characteristics, but it was just this more of like a feeling than a list of things that I wanted.
100%. And I have the list, by the way, of course, because I save everybody's list. But yeah, and abiding by those things that really make you happy as one of the touch points for finding a partner that makes you happy helps you avoid all the crap that we're fed by society. Like, oh, you need to have butterflies in your stomach, right? Because butterflies are just red flags. So we started to date in a different way. But so after we did our lunch at the photo shoot, now you knew personally after this 3-hour meeting who exactly your high GHQ guy is, who he might not be after we ripped up the first list, or we kind of merged the list, let's say. Yeah. And then what happened the next day, and how was that?
The next day, I think I was like, if you haven't already heard, or if it's not obvious yet, I love food. I was excited about the Four Seasons lunch. And one of the main things I was excited about being in Chicago for was just like the great restaurants. So
totally
I had my list of restaurants that I was excited to go to. And I don't even remember if I made reservations, but I probably did make reservations.
You probably did.
Ones that's
what we do.
I took them. Yeah. But I had never eaten dinner alone at a restaurant. And I told you and Lindsay about that, and you were like, oh my gosh, yeah, like go sit at the bar. And I was like, yeah, my goal is to just like make conversation with the person sitting next to me, no matter who they are. And I went to Girl and the Goat, and I did that. So, and it was a male who I guess another thing I left out is that like, I've always been intimidated by guys. Like I have a ton of girlfriends, but I don't have a lot of male friends. Just because I've found it much easier to build a connection with females than with males. But I was able to strike up a conversation with this random, like young man sitting next to me. So I just felt good about getting out of my comfort zone and doing that. And I was inspired by both of you to do that. So
did you hear that on day one? Okay. Knows who her high GHQ guy is and can flirt while sitting at a bar, right? I mean, that's amazing. High five through the audio waves to you. So that's amazing. So now you've had 2 amazing meals. You've flirted your way around the bar at the Girl and the Goat. Now, so the next day you show up at our photo studio in the West Loop.
Yeah. Yeah. And I remember being a little bit skeptical, I guess, of the photo shoot and like, how are we going to make sure that these photos don't look like, obviously cheesy glam photographer and like, I didn't want them to come off as, making it obvious that I used a professional to get my dating profile photos. But I was very pleasantly surprised by the experience. The makeup team did an amazing job. I have hated getting my makeup done. I never wear makeup, or I would put on some makeup for a first date, but I rarely wear makeup in my day-to-day, and I generally hate the way I look when I get my makeup done by someone else. But sure, the makeup team, it looked amazing. And yeah, I just loved how we went to like a variety of different spots. So it wasn't all just like in one place. I changed outfits several times, so we were able to get like a casual look and like a more glam look. And then also what I thought was probably important, which I had been missing, was like full body shots so that people could see, didn't feel like you were holding something back. So
your post Weight Watchers bod.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, the photo shoot was great. And yeah, the pictures looked amazing. Like I was shocked at how good they looked, to the point where my sister says that I catfished my current husband with my photos.
Oh my God. And he would totally disagree with that.
Yeah, he would probably disagree.
He would totally disagree. You're just as beautiful. And I'll put a page on you guys can check out the page on our website to see how beautiful Anushka really is, both during this podcast as well as in her photo shoot and at her wedding. So she's being very humble. And so what happens now? You're back on the East Coast. And you start dating.
Yeah. So I was like very energized coming out of our meeting in Chicago. And what I loved was that you and Lindsay just gave me a formula to follow. And it was like, get on the apps, you helped me with my profile, you gave me the photos. So my profile was done. I started getting back on the apps that I was previously on, like I think Bumble was the main one, and maybe Hinge, but I can't, like Bumble was where I had the most success. But yeah, she made it super formulaic of like spend 30 minutes a day on the app. Like that could be swiping, that could be responding to messages. But whatever it is, don't spend more or less than that. They gave me a formula of like how many dates to have per week, like what my pipeline should look like. I was like, this is great. Like I can build a pipeline and like, and filter people through it. So it was really helpful to just like think about it in similar ways to how I think about like work, where it's like, oh, there's data involved and there's a process and, a formula to how to be successful. So I found that super helpful. And immediately, like I started getting dates. Like it was shocking. I was like, wow, I've been on more dates in like a month than I had been on in 3 years.
That is amazing. Oh my gosh. Say that again for the people in the back.
Like the dates kept flying in. Like it was way more than I'd ever seen in terms of activity on the apps that I'd been on for 3 years.
And just for the record, sometimes people, over Photoshop and glam up and filter their photos. We have a zero Photoshop policy, right? Not one thing. Sometimes people are like, wow, can you just shave down my stomach a little bit or get rid of some of those wrinkles under my eyes? No, people want to date the person in the picture. So regardless of the ribbing that your sister gives you, you look exactly like your photos, and are like, the goal is when people meet you, they're like, okay, God, you look just like your photos, if not a little bit better, right? So it's never like, oh, I've been catfished, right? It's like, here I am, and I'm the best version of myself, and you're going to show up as that version to the date.
Yeah. Yes. So I did put makeup on.
So they're like, wow, you look just like your photos. So what started happening with the dates? So you're getting a lot of dates, some good, some bad, the good, the bad, the ugly. How was it? All of the above.
Yeah. There were some pretty decent dates. There were some really, really terrible dates where I was immediately able to identify red flags, probably only a handful of times. Like there weren't that many people that I encountered that threw up red flags. But yeah, I remember one guy, I went to meet him for a drink, and we started talking about, or I think he just talked about himself the whole time. He didn't ask me a single question. And like the questions that he did finally ask me a question. It was something about like, oh, where is your family from? And I said, oh, we're from Sri Lanka. And he was like, oh, do they have like indoor plumbing there?
Do they have indoor plumbing?
Yeah. Basically it was like, oh, like, do you have a flushable toilet in Sri Lanka? And I was just like, oh my God, this person is just so offensive. And he just kept asking more questions that were more and more offensive. So
oh my God.
That was definitely the worst date I went on. But I wasted
ridiculous
45 minutes of my life before he asked me if I wanted a second drink. And I was like, no, that's okay. Bye.
No, I'm good. I'm good. I need to go work on flushing my toilet.
That was absolutely terrible. But yeah, other than that, I think I had some like decent dates. There was definitely people I went on like several dates with. But yeah, I wasn't really finding many people that I was like, oh, like, this person makes me feel like that list of things that I was looking, my new list of
your new list
characteristics I was looking for. And it was kind of mutual. Maybe there were a couple guys that were like, oh, shocked that I didn't want to keep seeing them. But for the most part, I think most of the people that I didn't continue dating were, it was a mutual decision. I didn't mention it before, but I actually, before I met you and Lindsay, and after, I continued to ask my parents to set me up as like another potential avenue to meet people. And I don't know why I kept doing it, because they just like the number of people that my parents set me up with, it was probably like 3 guys total, but like every single one of them was just like a complete flop. So I don't know why I didn't learn after the first 2 times that the third time could be like, a disaster.
You have a pulse and he has a pulse. He's single. You're single. Oh, yeah. He lives in Saskatchewan though.
Yeah, literally. Yeah.
Literally.
Like none of the guys lived in the US. So, I have family in London. So I would go to visit my family in London, and my parents would set me up on a date with someone who lived there. And I was like, I have a career in the US. Like, why are you trying to move me to England? So along with the dating apps, was also trying to get my parents to continue to set me up with people. And they would always try to find me like a doctor who like comes from a good family, and, like typical kind of South Asian parent things that they're looking for. But a few months into working with you, I remember I was telling Lindsay that like my parents had found another potential person for me. And he was a doctor and came from a good family, but he lived in Canada. So I remember like talking to Lindsay, and she was like, no, like there's no harm. Like just, talk to him and see like how it goes. So I had a few phone conversations with him, and they seemed pretty good. Like I was like, oh, like he's easy to talk to. Like I, there wasn't any red flags. And at a certain point, he asked if I would be interested in meeting up. And I think Lindsay said, like, don't make a trip to him. Like, you don't want to put yourself out there on that level. Like, that's a big commitment. But he offered to come to me. And Lindsay's advice was like, yeah, that's great. Just like, don't commit to more than just dinner. And I was like, okay, yeah, great. Like, I don't feel like, having to babysit this person over a weekend in Boston.
No.
This person who I've never met. Looking back on it, there was definitely a couple like potential red flags before he got to Boston. But one of them was like the second time I talked to him, he wouldn't stop complaining about his parents.
Oh.
And I was like, that's kind of weird. Like, you haven't met me. You don't really know me. Like, why are you complaining about your parents? He also like trash talked a person that a mutual friend. And I was like, that person's my friend. So why are you speaking badly about her? So there was a couple red flags. I did talk to my mom about them and she was like, oh no, that's fine. That's not a weird thing to do. She was like, you would do that. And I was like, no, I wouldn't. I wouldn't do that to someone I just met.
And pause on this part, guys. Everybody fancies themselves being a dating expert and giving you good advice. No, that's not a red flag. That's not a red flag. We have, Anushka, as you know, we have a plan. We have lists of red flags, okay, by phases of dating. And somebody who's talking negatively of other people or mean to others, but not mean to you, these are all instant screen people out red flags, right? If this person, right? Because a lot of negativity on the outside is like negativity on the inside. If I'm going to trash talk someone, it's because I'm trash talking myself a lot. And that is nothing you can fix. And Lord knows we don't need any fixer-uppers in our dating funnels.
Exactly.
So sorry, mama.
Yeah, she was wrong. But yeah, so anyway, we set a date and he came to Boston and I had planned a restaurant for us to go to for dinner. And I remember meeting him there and that negativity trend just continued throughout the night to the point where like we sat down for dinner and he was like, oh, it's really loud in here. Should we just go somewhere else? And I was like, well, I picked this restaurant on purpose because I liked the food and the atmosphere. So no, we're not leaving. And I can't remember all the details, but all I remember was just like, it was like negative comment after negative comment after negative comment. And I was like, I just don't need this level of negativity in my life.
No, and you can hear it right away. And so often when we're dating and we've got that time clock and that, oh my God, I need to meet someone right away, we just settle for these things, right? But now you were a smart dater and you knew, okay, red flags only become brighter red. Yeah. Right. And so now he's like a blaring red flag. Yeah. And so we leave the date.
So we leave the date and just to be nice, I was like, okay, hasn't been to Boston before. He's flown all the way from Canada. I was like, okay, there's the walking tour of Boston tomorrow morning. Would you want to meet up for that? And he was like, okay, yeah, that sounds good. So I texted him the details of where to meet and when. And I was like, you'll have plenty of time before your flight leaves on Sunday night, like to get to the airport and catch your flight. And it was probably like 15 degrees that day on that Sunday where we were doing this walking tour. It was freezing, but he was from Canada. So I was like, he should be able to handle walking around in the cold. You're from Canada. But of course, he was complaining about the cold the whole time. And he also, I think people find this funny. Like my mom loves when I tell this story because she just thinks the story is hilarious. Varun also loves this story. He's heard it about 15 times. But he came to the walking tour on the cobblestone streets of Boston with his rolly suitcase. And I was like, why did you bring your rolling suitcase on a walking tour? You were staying in a hotel. You could have left it with the doorman. And I already told you had plenty of time before your flight. So he was like, oh yeah, I guess that's a good point. Like I could have done that.
Oh my
there was
God.
also a whole other, it was just like so loud and embarrassing. Like when I lived in Boston, I never even rolled my rolling suitcase when I was going to the airport because it was just so loud. I would just carry it everywhere.
So rolling suitcase dude is now walking throughout Boston, and you're counting the minutes before
I'm counting
the
the
rolling
minutes.
suitcase tour is over.
Yes, I'm just like dying for this tour to end. And it finally does. And I'm like, okay, like I need to go home. It's Sunday. I need to prepare for the week ahead. And he's like, oh, okay, I still have a few hours before my flight. I was like, okay, I'll drop you at a coffee shop. And with some like resistance, we walk into 3 different coffee shops because he was like, oh, there isn't a seat. And he was like complaining about, the lack of seats in the coffee shop. So I finally get to a coffee shop where there's 1 seat available. And he's like, oh, but what about you? There's only 1 seat. And I'm like, oh no, don't worry. I'm going to go home.
Bye.
So I remember like walking home from that date. And at this point, I think it was like 4:00 or something. And I had another first date scheduled for that night at 7:00. And I was like, I can't go on this next date. Like this whole last 2 days have just been exhausting.
You've been in like negativity stew.
Yeah. It's freezing. And I was about to text this person to try to reschedule, but I was like, no, you know what? Just like suck it up and do it and just go. And so that night is when I met Varun.
Yay! See, everyone, even off the heels of wacko rolly suitcase negative guy, you dusted off and you did it. And you went on the date. Now, you guys had met on the app. Now, back us up a little bit.
Yep. So we had met on the app probably like a few days before the first date. What I liked about Varun was that he was positive from the interactions we'd had on the app in our messages. And we chatted a little bit back and forth, but he was pretty quick to ask me on a first date. I didn't follow the part of the process where I did the phone call.
That's okay. Rule breakers. It's fine.
But I agreed to meet him for a drink. So the plan was to meet up. I didn't know too much about him other than like, I think he mentioned that like he had been out with his family in New York and he had been out to some good restaurants and things like that. And he had also mentioned the other thing that stood out to me was like, he had asked me like if I liked my job on the app. And he said, like, I love my job. And what I'm learning is that like most people don't actually like their jobs. And I was like, oh, wow, that is actually like pretty refreshing to have someone who like actually loves what they do. Cause I don't know that I can say that I like genuinely love what I do. Like, I don't hate it, but it's not something I'm like excited to go to work to do every day. So I think I just was surprised and refreshed. I found it refreshing that he was just positive. So I was like excited to meet him, but not like, oh, this is the one, like from the interactions we'd had on the apps.
Right. Especially coming off of bad dates. Sometimes we can have those gray, dark lenses on like, oh, here we go again. Here comes Mr. Positivity, loves his job. Like, great. Yeah, so you go meet him for a drink and.
So I go meet him for a drink. And I think I immediately felt like pretty comfortable. He was very charming, which I was a little worried was the red flag. Where I was like, oh, is he like too smooth? Like he turns this on for like every girl. Where he just like always had the right thing to say. Yeah. And so I was a little bit worried from the first date that like maybe he's just like a player who, dates a lot of girls and doesn't get serious. But the conversation was really easy. He asked a lot of questions, which I thought was really nice. And I just like felt good and comfortable being around him. And given it was Sunday night, he did ask if I wanted to have another drink. And I was like, I want to see him. Like, I think I made it clear, like, yeah, it would be great to see you again, but I need to go home because at this point it had been too many hours of dating for one weekend.
Totally.
And he asked me before we left if I'd like to see him again. And we had both talked about how we like ramen. And so he suggested that we meet up for ramen at this place in Cambridge, close to where I work and close to where he lived, to to meet up for a second date on Friday. But he said, there's no pressure to let me know now. Like, you can think about it and let me know if you're up for it.
Again, so charming. And now we know, just from a good place, not a player. Like, yes. That's just, it's like a good person who's courteous.
Yes, exactly. And so, so then I was excited, I think, a little bit, but not like so excited leaving, where I was like, oh, okay, that was like I'm glad I went on this date. Like, that was better than the average date that I've been on, but not like the best date I've ever been on. But then he followed up the next day. So like, I really liked how he was really proactive. And I think he asked me a question, because I had said how I go to Soul Cycle on Tuesday, or on like Tuesday mornings or something. And he was like, oh, like, did you go to Soul Cycle this morning? And I was like, oh no, Tuesday is my Soul Cycle day and today's Monday. So no, I just went to the gym. So I remember being like on the treadmill and getting this text from him.
Cute.
And I think pretty quickly after that, I told him, like, I'd love to meet up on Friday. But this was February 14th. Like, the first date was February 9th, and the second date was scheduled for Friday, February 14th.
Which you only now realize after you say yes to meeting up on Friday. Like, this is dun dun Valentine's Day.
And I think I realized it, but I was like, oh my God, does he realize it? Should I tell him it's Valentine's Day and be like, we could reschedule if you want? Like, is he going to think this is too big of a commitment? Is it going to be awkward for us to be on a second date with all these people that are out for Valentine's Day? So obviously I was like overthinking the whole thing, but ended up just not saying anything about it and just not addressing it. And, we planned to meet up on Friday, and we did. And I asked him on the date, I was like, did you know that today is Valentine's Day? And he was like, yeah, but like, he was like, some of my friends asked me if I was going to bring you flowers, but I thought that would be overkill for a second date. So I was like, yeah, I'm glad you didn't. Like, this,
let's just have ramen.
Let's just treat it like a normal day and not acknowledge the Valentine's Day part of it. So the second date was really good. I remember like just having a really good time, and was able to like be more myself, I think, and like open up a little bit more than I had on the first date, where I was like pretty tired and kind of over it. So from the second date, I think, is when I started to realize maybe this could be someone that could be a longer term relationship that I could.
Now let's put this into perspective. This is February 14th, 2020.
Yeah.
Okay. Just before the world's about to end a month later. Right. Yeah. So now you're on 2 dates, not knowing that we are walking into a freaking pandemic. Right.
Yeah, no
the world's
idea.
Still normal. We're hearing little bits and blips of what's going on in China. And I don't even know if Seattle or New York had opened up by that point, maybe the very first glimpses. So now what happens? You start, you've still got your funnel going.
Yes, I still have my funnel going. I'm still messaging new people, setting up new first dates, but I think we had a pretty good cadence of like meeting up every few days, every week, once a week, probably. And I think all those subsequent dates were just like more and more natural. Like, I started to feel better and better about it with each time I met him. But I was still following the process and not trying to like be exclusive too early. And I remember there was like one conversation, like we had gone on a date. I can't remember. It was like a lunch date or something. And he had told me, I'm not seeing any other people. And kind of just put that out there. I don't know if he asked me like specifically to be exclusive, but he kind of put it out there, and I was like, oh shoot, he's just told me this. Like, now I need to tell him that I still am dating other people. And like, in fact, I think I had a date the next day or that night. I don't even remember, a first date. And I felt really guilty having to tell him that, but I felt like I needed to be honest. If I like saw it going further. So later on, he was pretty cool about it. Like, I think he was just like, okay, yeah. Like, I think he might've said like, take your time or something like that. But he wasn't like, like livid or, didn't have a crazy reaction.
That's a very important point, right? Because sometimes we wonder, is this person too charming? Are they too grandiose? Blah, blah, blah. You date him slow. You've been on several dates. He says, I'm not dating anybody. You say, well, I am. Now, that is an excellent litmus test at that point. If somebody is going to be a bad partner for you, potentially, they're going to wig out, freak out, go crazy. If they potentially are going to be a good partner for you, they can take an answer that maybe they weren't expecting or they don't like and still be like, all right, that's cool. I'll be patient. You take your time, right? Because when a man wants to be with you, he'll move mountains to be with you and he'll be as patient as you need him to. So if somebody says to you, well, I'm not dating anybody else. And when you say, well, I'm a smart dater, I'm keeping my funnel active. And he's like, oh my God, right? And we've had situations blow up with people before where the other person gets crazy. That is a red flag right there. How do people react under pressure? How do people react when something doesn't go their way? Super crucial bit of information. So, we like all these little litmus tests as we're helping our clients date. Well, how does he react? If he has a good reaction, he stays in the funnel. And if he has a bad reaction, bye. So Varun clearly was making leaps and bounds in the smart dating lexicon.
Yeah. I mean, he was, from the first time I met him, I was like, he is much more emotionally aware than I am.
We loved him from day one.
Yeah, just like a better person in general, and better at maintaining relationships, like whether it be with his family or his friends or probably with me. But yeah, so I remember going on another first date and it was just like a little bit painful. The guy, there was nothing wrong with the guy, but I was just like, oh, this is just like I'm not having fun. I don't feel the same way as I do when I'm hanging out with Varun. And I think a few days later, after we had that conversation and after I went on the other first date with another guy, I was like, okay, he tells me now, I don't remember this, but I apparently asked him to be exclusive.
You're like, okay, I'm jumping out. Like, let's do this, right? And this is under the careful watch of both Lindsay and me, right? We're not letting anybody go rogue into a red flag situation. But he presented so beautifully, literally from day one. You're right. Incredibly kind, warm, emotionally intelligent, able to navigate conflicts and misunderstandings.
Yeah, exactly.
Really well.
And so then like a few days later, probably the pandemic hit. And I think that was a point where like it could have been terrible for our relationship, or it could have been great. And luckily for us, I think it was like really just something that like accelerated everything for us because pretty quickly, we weren't able to see anybody else. We really just saw each other, and ended up spending a lot more time together than we would have been able to in a pre-pandemic environment.
And did that bring you closer together?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, I think we got like very close very quickly, and actually like enjoyed spending time together, and spending all that time together didn't like push us apart or make us realize like there were qualities that we didn't like in each other. And so, yeah, I think I am thankful at this point for the pandemic because it actually helped us to get closer together, and progress our relationship much faster than we would have if we weren't in that environment.
Yeah. And what do you like best about him?
There's a lot of things, but probably just like how good he is at dealing with conflict and like managing relationships.
Wow.
He's always the person that I go to if I have a conflict with my mom or my sister or a friend. He always has like the best advice on how to deal with people. And I think that translates to how he handles me, where like I can be a little bit crazy and inflexible. And he's able to be like the flexible one in our relationship and is able to kind of meld and change small things to help me, and make me feel good. So probably that, and just like how loving and supportive he is. Like, he is really a partner, and like knows how important my career is to me, knows how important my family is to me, and is always just there to help support and make that a priority for both of us.
And I know we would often go back in and look at your marriage map contract and that list of people that make you happy and tick and tie. And I would venture a guess he's now, if we redid that exercise, he would be the number one person on your happy list.
Yeah.
With the same qualities. And that's our holy grail, right? And so, right, we knew you hit the jackpot. And so what happened now? Your relationship's expedited. We know the spoiler alert. We know the end.
So yes, the relationship was pretty expedited. I remember meeting his parents for the first time. He met my parents for the first time. And then I think my parents were very excited because our dog hates strangers, and she didn't bark when he walked into the door of the house. He came in with presents for everybody, including the dog. And
amazing.
They were very excited. And soon after that, they were like, oh, he needs to meet all of our friends. And I was like, can we just like slow it down a little bit?
Of course not. We're South Asian.
Yeah, he was a good sport about that too, because he loves meeting new people. So I didn't have a problem with having to meet all of my parents' close friends. And then, yeah, we got their blessing, the parents' blessing to move in together. And then, so that was in September of 2020. So yeah, that was pretty fast.
Yeah.
And then we ended up getting engaged in March of 2021. So like basically a year after we met. And then, yeah, we just got married in June. And so, yeah, it's been 6 months, I guess, a little bit more than 6 months of marriage.
And now you have a dog.
Yes. And now we have a dog who is very cute. He's getting a little more rambunctious, but he's very cute and we love him. So we're slowly building.
If you look back to early 2020, right, 3 years ago, what would you have ever thought you'd be here?
No, never. Like, I was convinced like that I was never going to find someone. Never did I ever think that I could meet someone and find, like, not only meet someone, but like meet the person that I was going to spend the rest of my life with. And yeah, I like looking back on it now, I'm still kind of shocked that I'm here.
3 years later.
Yeah.
Wow. I'm so happy for you. You deserve all of it.
Thank you. I mean, it's really thanks to you and thanks to Lindsay, because as I said, like, I was failing at the dating game before I met you guys. And yeah, I mean, my friends even say it, like, how my mindset was just like completely wrong. And you guys helped me to see that.
That's mindset is really, really important. And I know that's something we focused on call after call. Like, how do we look at this? How do we look at dating? How do we look at the relationship, right? How do we navigate the relationship? And mindset in life is everything. And I think you grew so much during our process, and we could both feel it and see it.
Yeah. And now I'm like wanting, to tell all my friends, like, you can do this. Like, I did it. There's like a formula for it. Like, call Bela and Lindsay because they can help you.
Oh, I'm so glad. I'm so glad that you found the perfect lid to your pot. And you guys can look on our website and see how cute these two are, because it's kind of ridiculous how adorably lovely they are. And again, I couldn't be happier for you. Do you have any parting advice you would give people that are on the fence or just kind of thinking it can't happen for them?
I guess parting advice would be, like, if you haven't had success, you're probably doing it wrong. So call Bela and Lindsay because they will help you. But no, really, I think, like, for people like me who have this like long list of qualities that they're looking for, most of those are not actually important. And so really identifying what Bela calls the happy list of people that make you feel good to be around, and what are the qualities that those people have, I think was like the biggest thing that helped me change my mindset in terms of what I was looking for.
I'm like weepy here, teary, goosebumpy. So thank you so, so much for telling us your love story. It's and thank you for keeping your promise way back when in the dating world. Bella, if I get engaged, you can share my story with everybody, because so many of our clients are on the down low, right? And we can tell certain stories. So thank you for keeping good on your promise. I wouldn't expect anything otherwise. So whether you are, an Ivy League grad, or you're driving in your car on the way to the gym and you haven't gone to school, it doesn't matter. Just remember, love exists for you. It's a when, it's not an if. Start to do things differently. Like Anushka said, there is no reason to sit around and stew in your juice if you aren't getting the progress you want. It's like, look at anything in your life. If you're not in the right shape, if you're not making progress at work, you would change things up. Think about, just for me, your gift to me today is think about one thing you can change to make your dating life better this week, and let us know what that is. So, smart daters, until next week,